Today I'm going to be talking about cults and their use with mushrooms. The cult names, the mushroom names, the negative side effects, and eventual downfall of the cults themselves. I'll be mentioning some of the very first cults in history that used mushrooms. And then I will transition into the good old 60s and 70s where mushrooms were used in other types of cults. I'm curious to look at the usage of mushrooms and how it's changed with humanity. As I talk about these cults, let me know which one is your favorite. Just kidding, don't join cults, they are bad for you. When looking at these first few cults, I want to uncover the secrets of humanity and their participation with mushrooms. So as I talk about cults, for these first ones especially, I'm not really talking about the modern fringe group of people hiding out in compounds. I'm mostly talking about cultural dynamics and spiritual offerings, sort of a thing. In pre-Columbia, Mesoamerica, and ancient Greece, a mystery cult was an elusive secret society with these secret initiation rites. When talking about these specific cults, they all use mushrooms that I'm going to be talking about today. And my question is why mushrooms? And I think the answer to that question is their psychoactive properties. When consuming specific types of mushrooms, your brain somehow thinks that it sees things that are not real, experiences things that are not fully there, and potentially has very dangerous side effects. Whenever looking at the California 60s and 70s cults, I'll mostly be mentioning their compound sort of cult rituals. As for these first ones, I really wanted to look at some of the very first mushrooms used in these rituals. One of the earlier known cults was Teonanácatl, who dabbled in hallucinogenic mushrooms. Teonanácatl means cult of the sacred mushroom, and this is of the Aztecs. Aztec priests and Maya secret societies held night rituals where they would perform these rituals called veladas. These fungi were consumed to provide direct communication with divine, healing, and provide some sort of divination. The specific types of mushrooms used were Psychobin mexicana, Psychobin sapsicorum, and Psychobin cumbensis. I've actually covered mushrooms, which I don't think I can say on YouTube because the last time I tried to post it, they were like, no, this is not okay. If you would like to see that video, I will have that linked here. Basically, these are all mushrooms that will make you super trip balls whenever you take them, to say it nicely, or I guess not so nicely. This just triggers perception, mood, and consciousness by specifically activating a serotonin receptor in the brain, specifically 5-HT2A receptors. And like I said, the effects of these will basically have you tripping balls, where the effects of these mushrooms have profound auditory and visual hallucinations. Definitely a altered sense of time, intense emotional shifts, ego dissolution, and perceived spiritual revelations, which you can kind of see where these cults kind of get that. The negative side effects for these mushrooms, though, are extreme panic attacks, anxiety attacks, as you would assume, paranoia, confusion, elevated heart rate, nausea, and persistent perceptual changes in vulnerable individuals. But there was a reason why this specific cult took these mushrooms. It wasn't just for these magical effects, but it was to see their god. The best documented account for the Teonanácatl cult was from Saint Bernardo in 17th century Florentine Codex. These rituals were highly structured and they had a specific desired outcome. The sacrament. Participants fasted before consuming mushrooms so that they would have an empty stomach when they were consuming all of these psychobins. The fungi were generally taken at night and ingested with honey and cacao. Sounds like a sweet treat. The experience. Sagun recorded that the mushrooms were intoxicating and often had side effects that would leave people weeping and in these trances. Seeing Shipili. The next step was to see their deity, which was Shipili, or the Flower Prince. This was a patron of beauty, dance, art, and altered states of consciousness. Statues of this deity showed him in a trance, surrounded by carvings of psychotropic flora. So, That was their main goal, to see this deity. However, this cult ended by the Spanish conquest in Mexico in the 16th century by the Catholic Church. Good old Catholic Church coming in. They condemned all sort of ideology of this god, of their practice, the rituals, everything, to be pretty much illegal because of the church now in its place. They were thought to have been driven in the mountains, actually, so you can actually find remnants of these cults still active. They're very secret, they're very hidden, but they still exist nowadays, which I was surprised to hear. I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. They primarily still exist in indigenous groups like the Maztec. Even though the Catholic Church wanted to stamp them out, they still live on, but in hiding. The Eleusinian Mysteries were a secret cult in Greece that honored their gods Demeter and Persephone. Spanning nearly 2,000 years, this cult culminated a 14-mile pilgrimage from Athens to a town of Eleusis. While this cult is not really based on a specific mushroom cap, it does include a fungi, and I thought I would mention this. This is an old-timey cult, the good old days, back in the day when they were just drinking fungi-infested barley. That is what they did. So this is a fungi, parasitic fungi, which I've covered parasitic fungi in the past if you'd like to see those type of videos. Parasitic fungi are fungi that actually eat living things. They attack living things, which is kind of a crazy thing. It's almost like a Venus flytrap would. Similar idea, except this parasitic fungi eats barley and rye. I mean, maybe they just aren't gluten-free and they just really like eating barley and rye. I mean, it makes sense. The gross part about this, though, is that the fungus turns the barley and rye a purple-black color, which is gross enough. It's basically like getting mold on bread. You kind of don't want to ingest that, right? But they were doing it and they called it a special type of tea. So basically, ergot, which is the parasitic fungi, the fungi was made into a drink called Kykeon. And they would drink this drink and they would trip out. The preparation was closely guarded under pain of death. The side effects for this stuff was really, really bad, but I'm guessing that the outcome was enough to where they wanted to keep doing it. The fungi was likely carefully processed or strained to reduce really bad toxins while preserving those psychoactive properties. The negative side effects were actually known as a condition called eroganism, which I was like, that sounds a little suspicious, but I'm probably saying it wrong. Erogotism. Erogotism sounds like another word that I was really afraid to say on YouTube, but it is not that. It is just the side effects of drinking parasitic infested barley and rye drink Kykeon. Okay, so let's get into what it does. So to the human body, it is also referred to as Saint Anthony's fire, these side effects, because of how gruesome they are, which is included but not limited to severe vasoconstriction leading to gangrene, burning pain in limbs, violent seizures, paranoia, mania, and death. What? But the side effects also included good old visions, altered consciousness, euphoria, and feelings of connected to the underworld, or a rebirth myth of those gods that I mentioned earlier, Demeter and Persephone. Sorry if I didn't say that right. I kind of wonder if seeing their gods kind of made it all worth it. Kind of like childbirth. But alas, the cult died off, and so did erogotism, the condition of drinking this tea. As culture has progressed, we have learned not to feed people this parasite in food. We've figured out ways to store it better so that it doesn't get quote unquote molded and then feed it to people. So there has been like ways that this has gone away, because just how many people were dying from taking this? Yeah, they were feeling like they were tripping out. They were also dying. Like, this was a condition. The Eleusinian Mysteries ended in the 4th century. Roman Emperor Theodosius I issued decrees that closed all pagan sanctuaries and banned sacred rituals. The final blow came in 396 CE when Alaric, king of the Goths, led an invasion that completely looted and destroyed all physical sanctuary at Eleusis. So that was the end. No more Kykeon tea, guys. Humanity definitely decided to erase eroticism altogether by providing correct storage for food, and overall this isn't really a problem anymore. I guess it is kind of something to be said. It does make sense that people were if you think about like alcohol nowadays, what alcohol is actually made of is a similar sort of thing. It almost becomes molded, and that's how you get the effects of alcohol. It's similar in that way, except this was a different type because it was actually causing pain and death, as well as like the trippiness of it. But this was just kind of a maybe first attempt at creating alcohol gone very, very wrong. Jumping forward in time to a more hippie day and age, let's look at the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, which sounds so nice, but I don't really trust it, especially with a name like that. Back in 1960s and 1970s in South California, John Griggs started as a spiritual commune in Laguna Beach before becoming one of the largest illicit drug dealers in North America, supplying mushrooms and LSD. The mushrooms found for the cult were the mushrooms, or Psychobin cabensis, which were wild harvested in southern Mexico. They also found a local Amanita muscaria, which is the fly amanita, known as the iconic mushroom, to use in their cults for all of their hallucinogenics. Griggs actively sought after vulnerable youth that were surfers and anti-war protesters by having outdoor communal sacramental sessions. He would basically give out free marijuana to people that were more vulnerable than normal so that he could kind of acclaim them to his cult. Eventually, his free Mary Jane kind of turned into something a little bit darker. When taking these drugs, these youths were not only conformed to his behaviors and ways of the cult, but sort of stripped away from their identities altogether. That's the sad reality of cults, is that sort of integration process. I think cults are super interesting in that way, to where they can actually break down a person and then make them conform to their ways. The cult ended up turning into something so much more darker and eventually became one of the biggest drug dealers in North America, and is honestly a lot of cause of deaths, but also the drug influx in North America in the 60s and 70s. And because of all of these drugs, not just Mary Jane, but a little bit stronger than that, and also, of course, mushrooms, it kind of led to other cults taking it and kind of using those drugs. The name enough sounds friendly, but it definitely became something that it just was the opposite of. I find that it's so interesting in life how things are named a certain way to be presented as this perfect picture thing, and in reality are probably doing the opposite. So that is something I very much dislike, but it was the reality with this cult. The Brotherhood of Enlightenment was really just drug dealing. The worst part about this, in my opinion, is that there wasn't just young adults in these groups, but also their children. And because they had a whole bunch of children running around while the parents were getting high, the kids would accidentally get addicted to drugs themselves. There was a lot of incidents in the specific cults that was eventually dubbed hippie mafia, where there was accidental deaths due to overdose because they started taking on stronger and stronger drugs. It was almost like marijuana was the gateway drug for them. I have never really understood how that could be a gateway drug, because it is one of the chillest things ever. It wasn't just marijuana in this cult, it was also the psychobins, it was the mushrooms, it was the fly amanita, hallucinogenic sort of stuff. The craziest part of this cult's downfall was actually John Griggs himself. He actually died of an overdose from a bad batch of Kykeon, probably some sort of synthetic drug added with mushrooms that was tainted in some way to where it caused an overdose for him. The cult eventually broke up because their leader had passed away, and overall it was just kind of a sad turn of events, mostly because the cult was there to begin with, not because he died. I'm not saying that. But yeah, cults and drugs, am I right? Can't be subjected to someone's beliefs sober completely unless you're a church, I guess. Speaking of church, let's talk about this other church. Let's talk about the Process Church of Final Judgment. What a mouthful. You will never believe this. I was like super shocked to hear what this church believes, but it's kind of unlike anything I've ever really heard about. Obviously, I don't really do a whole lot of deep dives or research into churches in general, especially these types of churches. But basically, this church is the establishment of Christ and Satan getting together. This feels like the absolute opposite of any denomination I've ever heard about, especially in the United States, but also like, you gotta be on some serious drugs. Wait, oh, they were probably all on drugs, that would make sense. Mushrooms might be to blame, but I'm not sure. The Process Church of Final Judgment was a niche sect founded in London in 1966 by former Scientologist Robert D. Grimston and Mary Ann MacLean. Oh, and they exclusively only wore black cloaks. Not brown cloaks like Jedi. I don't think they're that cool at all. Also, look how creepy they are. Ew. The group developed a complex theology that sort of focused on 4 specific individuals, which I think are only 2 because of the names, but here they are. Jehovah, Lucifer, Satan, and Christ. Just sounds like 2 people with a bunch of names, right? But no, there are 4 deities to them, and they all get along. The mushrooms they used were Kykeon cyanese and Kykeon basidus, which are native to Pacific Northwest and the West Coast in general. The leadership would find these mushrooms wild harvested, and they would specifically give certain doses to their congregation. As most cults, they preyed on the very vulnerable, mostly young people off the street, which is just despicable. And they would basically offer them the promise of shelter, which basic human need, of course, but also spiritual illumination, which should have been the red flag. But before anyone was actually admitted into the church, they had to go this ritual or this cleansing ritual, which just sounds bad to the bone. They consumed mushrooms in complete darkness and listened to their sermons. Again, what's with the darkness? Why do we gotta have darkness and reading spooky stories? That is not okay. It kind of seems like the way to get into a cult is by mushrooms, dark room, scary stories. So if you ever encounter that, run away. Don't go into the light, actually. Go into the light. Obviously, you can kind of guess that drugs plus crazy sermons will equal something kind of bad. They experience sensory dissertation, severe disorientation, just being in a dark room in general, I can assume, existential dread, synesthesia. What? Okay, synesthesia, which is seeing sounds and hearing colors. Oh my god. And extreme open loop suggestibility, which is why they use drugs. They're more susceptible. I recently watched this movie where she drinks this special mushroom tea. Made me think of creating a video for the real life events of cults using mushrooms. But also, they kept mentioning it in that movie, the suggestibility idea. So I was like, that is crazy, but it's true. Members who would experience bad trips would experience those things, but also really, really terrifying hallucinations, lingering flashbacks, extreme terror, and compliance born out of psychological trauma. The church gained a notorious reputation due to media, urban legends, but widely publicized theories connecting the group Charles Manson was having with this one. Charles Mance's murderous family in the late 1960s, as well as Son of Sam killings in the 1970s. Despite being largely investigated and clearing their name, the stigma caused a public backlash. And this is the ending of the church. In the 1970s, because of all of this stuff going on in the media, a lot of people were very suspicious of a lot of really bad things going on in the church. The church basically left a lot of the followers to leave. Under Mary Ann McLean, the group rebranded to Foundation Faith of God and eventually migrated itself to Kebab, Utah. But over time, it actually abandoned the church mentality and framework, and they actually focused on helping animals, which is interesting. Today, the organization has actually morphed into the Best Friends Animal Society, which is America's largest no-kill shelter. So I guess good can come from cults. Not all cults, but just one cult. Like, how does that actually happen? I guess she was like, you know what? I'm gonna turn this into something good. In conclusion, I hope you gained a little bit of information on which mushrooms can do how much harm and why cults are bad. Of course, I don't do a whole lot of videos on cults, I'm just actually interested in them. Not being in one or running one, just the theories of them. Because how on earth can people actually erase their identity boggles my mind. But anyways guys, if you liked this video, go ahead and leave me a comment. Which cult was your favorite? And which mushroom did you find the most shocking of negative side effects? Because there was a lot of them. I do a lot of deep dives on mushrooms if you want to subscribe. But anyways guys, thank you so much for watching this video and I appreciate you guys being here. Okay, that is all for now. Bye! Psychoban commences. Wow. Which are native to, excuse me,